In the shadowed corridors of Buckingham Palace, where centuries of royal tradition echo through marble halls, a single piece of jewellery has become the centre of an unprecedented family drama. The Queen's Jubilee Brooch, a magnificent sapphire and diamond creation that has graced the most important moments in British royal history, sits locked away in the palace vault, while three of the most powerful women in the monarchy wage a quiet war for its possession. What started as a simple matter of inheritance has transformed into something far more complex, a battle that reveals the hidden tensions, unspoken rivalries, and carefully guarded secrets that exist behind the palace walls. Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense approach and fierce loyalty to royal duty, has made a decision that has sent shockwaves through the royal household. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has received an unexpected gift that could change her position in the royal hierarchy forever. And Queen Camilla, despite her position as the current Queen Consort, has found herself on the outside looking in. Her claim to the precious brooch firmly rejected. This is not just a story about jewelry. This is a story about power, tradition, family loyalty, and the complex relationships that shape the modern British monarchy. Behind every smile at every public engagement, behind every carefully choreographed royal appearance, lies a web of personal relationships that the public rarely sees. The fate of the Jubilee Brooch has become a symbol of something much larger, the future direction of the royal family, and the women who will help shape it for generations to come. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones of Windsor Castle. As Princess Anne made her way through the private apartments, her footsteps echoing with purpose down corridors that had witnessed 8 decades of royal history. It was a crisp October morning, and the Princess Royal had arrived early for what she believed would be a routine meeting with the palace's chief curator about organizing her late mother's jewelry collection. What she discovered that morning would set in motion a chain of events that would captivate the royal family and change the dynamics of palace life forever. Anne had always been the most practical of Queen Elizabeth's children. While her brothers had pursued their various interests and controversies, she had quietly dedicated herself to royal duty with an efficiency that earned her respect both within the palace walls and among the British public. Her approach to royal responsibilities was straightforward and uncompromising, much like her personality. She had little patience for drama or ceremony when there was work to be done, and the task of sorting through her mother's extensive jewelry collection was something she approached with characteristic, methodical precision. The royal vault beneath Windsor Castle was a place few people ever saw. Protected by multiple layers of security and accessible only to senior members of the royal family and trusted palace staff, it housed some of the most valuable and historically significant pieces in the royal collection. As Anne descended the stone steps into the climate-controlled chamber, she was accompanied by Margaret Hartwell, the chief curator who had served the royal household for over 30 years. Margaret's knowledge of the royal collection was encyclopedic, and her discretion was absolute. The vault itself was impressive in its understated elegance. Custom-built cases lined the walls, each one containing pieces that represented centuries of royal history. Tiaras that had graced the heads of queens, necklaces that had adorned princesses at state dinners, and brooches that had been worn to mark the most significant moments in British royal tradition. The lighting was soft but precise, designed to protect the precious stones while allowing their beauty to shine through the protective glass. Anne moved through the collection with practiced efficiency, making notes on her tablet as Margaret provided historical context for each piece. They had been working for nearly 2 hours when Margaret paused before a case that had been tucked away in a corner of the vault. Inside, nestled on midnight blue velvet, was a brooch that seemed to capture and reflect the light from every angle. The Jubilee Brooch, as it had come to be known, was a masterpiece of royal jewelry design. Created in 1977 to commemorate Queen Elizabeth's Silver Jubilee, the brooch was a stunning combination of sapphires and diamonds set in platinum. The central stone was a cashmere sapphire of extraordinary quality, surrounded by a sunburst design of diamonds that had been cut specifically for this piece. But what made the brooch truly special was not just its beauty or its monetary value. It was the history it represented and the personal significance it had held for the late Queen. Elizabeth had worn the Jubilee brooch to mark some of the most important moments of her reign. It had graced her dress during the Silver Jubilee celebrations, had been her choice for the opening of Parliament during significant years, and had accompanied her to state dinners with world leaders. More personally, she had chosen to wear it during family celebrations and private moments that held special meaning for her. The brooch had become a symbol of her reign and her personal taste, representing both the grandeur of the monarchy and the woman who had worn the crown for 7 decades. Margaret's voice was soft as she explained the brooch's history to Anne. The curator had been present when the brooch was first created, had watched it being fitted for the Queen and had been responsible for its care and maintenance throughout Elizabeth's reign. She spoke of how the Queen had particularly loved this piece, how it had been among her personal favourites rather than simply part of the official crown jewels. This distinction was important in royal circles, where jewellery could be categorised as belonging either to the crown or to the individual monarch's personal collection. As Anne listened to Margaret's explanation, she found herself studying the brooch more carefully. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with each diamond perfectly placed to enhance the central sapphire's deep blue colour. But beyond its physical beauty, Anne could sense the emotional weight the piece carried. This was not simply a valuable piece of jewellery, it was a tangible connection to a mother's legacy, and a symbol of the monarchy's continuity. The conversation that followed was one that would be remembered and discussed in palace circles for months to come. Margaret, with the careful diplomacy that comes from decades of royal service, mentioned that there had been some informal inquiries about the brooch's future. Queen Camilla, in her new role as Queen Consort, had expressed interest in incorporating some of Elizabeth's personal jewellery into her own collection. It was a reasonable request given her position, and one that followed established royal protocol for jewellery inheritance. However, as Margaret continued to speak, it became clear that the situation was more complex than a simple transfer of jewellery from one generation to the next. The Jubilee Brooch, while part of Elizabeth's personal collection, had been specifically mentioned in private conversations the late Queen had had with several family members. Elizabeth had spoken fondly of the piece to Catherine, the Princess of Wales, during their private visits together. She had shared stories of the occasions when she had worn it, and had even allowed Catherine to examine it closely during one memorable afternoon at Balmoral. Anne listened to this information with growing interest. Her mother had been known for her careful consideration of how her personal possessions would be distributed after her death. Elizabeth had spent considerable time in her final years thinking about the legacy she would leave behind, not just in terms of the monarchy itself, but in the personal touches that would connect future generations to her memory. The fact that she had spoken specifically to Catherine about the Jubilee Brooch suggested that she had particular intentions for its future. The Princess Royal's decision-making process was characteristically swift and decisive. Anne had inherited her mother's practical nature and her ability to cut through complexity to reach the heart of a matter. As she stood in the vault, surrounded by the treasures of royal history, she realized that the fate of the Jubilee Brooch represented something larger than a simple matter of jewelry distribution. It was an opportunity to honor her mother's wishes while also making a statement about the future direction of the royal family. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had earned a special place in Queen Elizabeth's affections during her years as a working member of the royal family. The late Queen had watched with approval as Catherine had navigated the challenges of royal life with grace and dignity. More importantly, Elizabeth had seen in Catherine someone who understood the weight of royal responsibility and who was committed to serving the monarchy with the same dedication that she herself had shown throughout her reign. Anne's relationship with Catherine was one of mutual respect and understanding. Despite the differences in their generations and their positions within the royal hierarchy, they shared a commitment to duty and a practical approach to royal responsibilities. Anne had watched Catherine's evolution from a nervous bride into a confident and capable princess, and she had been impressed by Catherine's ability to balance her role as a mother with her royal duties. The more Anne thought about the situation, the clearer her path forward became. The Jubilee Brooch represented her mother's personal taste and her commitment to the monarchy. Catherine represented the future of the royal family and the continuation of the values that Elizabeth had embodied throughout her reign. The connection between the two seemed not just appropriate but inevitable. Margaret had remained diplomatically silent during Anne's contemplation, understanding that the Princess Royal needed time to consider the implications of whatever decision she might make. The curator's role was to provide information and context, not to influence royal family decisions. However, her years of service had given her insight into the personalities and preferences of the royal family members, and she could sense the direction of Anne's thoughts. The security protocols surrounding the royal jewellery collection were extensive and well established. Any movement of pieces from the vault required documentation, approval from senior palace staff, and careful handling by trained professionals. Anne was well aware of these procedures, having been involved in similar transfers throughout her adult life. What made this situation different was not the logistics of moving the brooch, but the potential ramifications of her decision. When Anne finally spoke, her voice carried the quiet authority that came from a lifetime of royal service. She instructed Margaret to begin the paperwork necessary to transfer the Jubilee Brooch from the general royal collection to Catherine's personal jewelry collection. The transfer would be done quietly and efficiently, without fanfare or public announcement. It would be presented as a private gift from one family member to another, a gesture that honoured both the late Queen's memory and Catherine's position within the royal family. Margaret nodded her understanding and made the necessary notes in her ledger. As the chief curator, she had witnessed many such transfers over the years, but she sensed that this one carried particular significance. The decision to give the brooch to Catherine, while bypassing Queen Camilla's informal claim to it, was one that would send ripples through the royal household and beyond. As they prepared to leave the vault, Anne took one last look at the Jubilee brooch. In just a few hours, it would begin its journey from the secure confines of the royal collection to a new chapter in its history. She felt confident that her mother would have approved of the decision, and that the brooch would continue to represent the best traditions of the royal family in Catherine's care. The walk back through Windsor Castle's corridors took on a different quality for Anne. Each step carried her further from the moment of decision, and closer to the implementation of a plan that would soon become the subject of intense palace discussion. She had set in motion something that could not be easily undone, and she was fully aware of the implications of her choice. Margaret, walking beside her, was already mentally preparing for the conversations that would inevitably follow. As chief curator, she would need to handle the practical aspects of the transfer, while also managing the diplomatic challenges that would arise when other family members learned of the decision. Her loyalty was to the royal family as a whole, but her responsibility was to carry out the wishes of its senior members. The morning that had begun as a routine review of royal jewellery had transformed into something far more significant. Anne's decision to give the Jubilee brooch to Catherine would soon become the catalyst for conversations and conflicts that would test the relationships within the royal family and reveal the complex dynamics that existed beneath the surface of palace life. As news of the decision began to spread through the carefully maintained channels of palace communication, the stage was set for a drama that would captivate royal watchers and provide insight into the human relationships that existed behind the formal facade of monarchy. The Jubilee brooch, with its brilliant sapphires and diamonds, had become the centre of a story that was about much more than jewellery. It was about family, loyalty, tradition, and the future of the British royal family itself. The news reached Queen Camilla through the carefully orchestrated channels that governed communication within the royal household. But the manner of its delivery did nothing to soften the impact of its content. She was in her private study at Clarence House, reviewing the agenda for an upcoming charity engagement, when her private secretary, Amanda Richardson, knocked softly on the mahogany door that separated the Queen Consort's personal workspace from the more formal reception areas of her London residence. Amanda had served in various capacities within the royal household for over 15 years, and her discretion and diplomatic skills had earned her the trust of several senior royal family members. She understood the delicate balance required when conveying sensitive information, particularly when that information had the potential to create tension within the family. As she entered Camilla's study, her expression was carefully neutral, but those who knew her well would have detected the subtle signs of unease that accompanied difficult conversations. Camilla looked up from her papers with the warm smile that had become her signature during public appearances. But the smile faded as she read the concern in her secretary's face. Amanda's approach was characteristically direct but diplomatic. She explained that Princess Anne had made a decision regarding the distribution of Queen Elizabeth's personal jewellery collection, specifically concerning the Jubilee brooch that had been among the late Queen's most treasured pieces. The information was delivered with careful precision, focusing on facts rather than interpretations or implications. The Jubilee brooch would be transferred to Catherine, Princess of Wales, as a personal gift from Princess Anne, in accordance with what Anne believed to have been Queen Elizabeth's wishes. The transfer was being processed through the proper channels and would be completed within a week. It was presented as a family matter, handled privately and without public announcement. Camilla's initial reaction was one of surprise rather than anger. She had indeed expressed interest in the Jubilee brooch during informal conversations with palace staff, viewing it as a natural addition to her growing collection of royal jewellery. As the new Queen Consort, she had been gradually incorporating pieces from the royal collection into her wardrobe following established precedents set by previous queens. The Jubilee brooch, with its exceptional beauty and historical significance, had seemed like an obvious choice for someone in her position. Her surprise quickly gave way to a more complex mixture of emotions. There was disappointment, certainly, as she had genuinely admired the brooch and had envisioned wearing it to future state occasions. But there was also a deeper concern about what the decision might represent in terms of her position within the royal family hierarchy and the relationships that governed palace life. Amanda remained diplomatically silent as Camilla processed the information, understanding that her role was to provide facts and support rather than to offer opinions or advice on family matters. The silence in the study was broken only by the soft ticking of an antique clock that had been a wedding gift from the late Queen Mother, a reminder of the long history of relationships and traditions that influenced every aspect of royal life. When Camilla finally spoke, her voice carried the careful control that came from years of navigating the complexities of royal existence. She inquired about the process that had led to Anne's decision, seeking to understand whether there had been formal consultations or whether the decision had been made unilaterally. Amanda's response was measured and factual, explaining that Princess Anne, as Queen Elizabeth's daughter and a senior member of the royal family, had full authority to make decisions regarding her mother's personal collection. The conversation that followed revealed the intricacies of royal jewelry inheritance, a subject that was far more complex than most people realized. Unlike the crown jewels, which belonged to the institution of the monarchy and passed automatically from one sovereign to the next, personal jewelry collections were subject to the individual preferences and decisions of their owners. Queen Elizabeth had maintained a substantial personal collection, separate from the official state jewelry, and the distribution of these pieces was governed by her expressed wishes and the judgment of her surviving family members. Camilla's understanding of these protocols was thorough, gained through years of gradual integration into royal life and careful study of the traditions that governed every aspect of monarchy. She knew that her position as queen consort gave her certain privileges and access to royal jewelry, but she also understood that personal pieces often carried emotional significance that transcended their monetary value or official importance. As the immediate shock of the news began to fade, Camilla found herself considering the broader implications of Anne's decision. The choice to give the brooch to Catherine rather than to the current queen consort sent a clear message about family relationships and future expectations. It suggested that Anne viewed Catherine as the most appropriate custodian for this particular piece, based either on Queen Elizabeth's expressed wishes or on Anne's own assessment of what would best serve the royal family's interests. The relationship between Camilla and Catherine had always been cordial and professionally appropriate, but it had lacked the warmth and closeness that had developed between Catherine and other family members. This was not unusual in royal circles, where relationships often developed slowly and were influenced by complex factors, including age differences, shared interests, and compatible personalities. Both women had approached their relationship with mutual respect and diplomatic courtesy, but neither had sought to develop a deeper personal connection. The decision regarding the Jubilee Brooch highlighted these relationship dynamics in a way that was both subtle and significant. It suggested that Anne viewed Catherine as having a closer connection to Queen Elizabeth's memory and intentions, or perhaps that she saw Catherine as better positioned to carry forward the values and traditions that the brooch represented. Either interpretation carried implications for how family relationships were perceived and valued within the royal household. Camilla's response to the situation reflected both her diplomatic training and her genuine commitment to family harmony.
Rather than expressing anger or resentment, she chose to focus on understanding the reasoning behind the decision and finding ways to support what was clearly intended as a gesture of respect for Queen Elizabeth's memory.
Her years in royal life had taught her the importance of maintaining dignity and grace even in situations that might personally disappoint or challenge her.
The practical implications of the decision extended beyond personal feelings to questions of protocol and public perception. Royal jewelry choices were closely watched by the media and the public, and the appearance of the Jubilee brooch in Catherine's possession, rather than Camilla's, would inevitably generate speculation and commentary. Palace communication staff would need to prepare for questions about the transfer and develop appropriate responses that honored family privacy while satisfying public interest. Amanda's role in this situation was to ensure that all practical matters were handled smoothly and that Camilla was fully informed about any developments related to the brooch transfer. This included coordinating with other palace officers to ensure consistent messaging and preparing briefing materials that would help Camilla navigate any public questions that might arise about royal jewelry choices. The afternoon following the initial notification brought additional conversations and consultations as the implications of the decision became clearer. Camilla spoke with Charles, who had been informed of his sister's decision through his own palace channels. Their conversation was private and diplomatic, focusing on family harmony and support for Anne's judgment, rather than on any personal disappointments that might exist. Charles's position in the situation was particularly delicate, as he needed to balance his role as king with his relationships as both a brother and a husband. His response emphasized the importance of respecting individual family members' decisions while maintaining unity and support for all concerned parties. This approach reflected his broader philosophy of modernizing the monarchy while preserving its essential traditions and values. The evening brought time for reflection and private consideration of the situation's broader implications. Camilla found herself reviewing not just the immediate circumstances surrounding the brooch, but the larger questions about her role and relationships within the royal family. Her position as queen consort was secure and respected, but the brooch decision reminded her that family dynamics continued to evolve and that her place within those dynamics required ongoing attention and cultivation. The support staff at Clarence House had been briefed on the situation and instructed to handle any related inquiries with appropriate discretion. This included ensuring that all communications were coordinated through proper channels and that family privacy was protected while official business continued normally. The ability to manage such situations smoothly was a testament to the professionalism and loyalty of the royal household staff. As news of the decision began to circulate through the broader palace network, reactions were varied but generally supportive of family harmony and respect for Queen Elizabeth's memory. Senior staff members who had worked closely with the late Queen recognized the significance of the Jubilee Brooch and understood the thoughtfulness that must have gone into Anne's decision. Their focus was on ensuring that all practical aspects of the transfer were handled with appropriate care and discretion. The royal protection officers and security staff were briefed on the logistics of transferring such a valuable piece, ensuring that all safety protocols were followed and that the brooch's movement from vault to recipient was accomplished without incident. This level of coordination was routine for valuable royal jewelry, but the particular significance of this piece required extra attention to detail and security. Palace communications teams began preparing for potential media interest in the story, developing background materials about the brooch's history and significance while maintaining appropriate boundaries around family privacy. Their goal was to be prepared for questions while not actively promoting or discussing the transfer, allowing it to remain a private family matter unless public interest required more formal acknowledgement. The legal and administrative aspects of the jewelry transfer required careful attention to documentation and proper procedures. Royal jewelry movements were tracked meticulously, with detailed records maintained for insurance, security, and historical purposes. The transfer of the Jubilee Brooch from the general royal collection to Catherine's personal collection required proper authorization and documentation to ensure clarity of ownership and responsibility. Financial advisors and insurance specialists were consulted to ensure that all aspects of the transfer were properly documented for tax and insurance purposes. While royal jewelry was generally exempted from standard inheritance procedures, the movement of such valuable pieces still required careful attention to legal and financial details to protect both the individuals involved and the broader royal estate. The end of the day brought a sense of resolution and forward movement, with all parties focused on ensuring that the transfer proceeded smoothly and that family relationships remained strong and supportive. Camilla's gracious acceptance of the situation and her commitment to family harmony had set a positive tone that influenced how others approached and discussed the matter. As preparations continued for the formal transfer of the Jubilee Brooch to Catherine, the focus began to shift from the decision itself to its implementation and the positive message it would send about royal family values and unity. The situation had tested relationships and protocols, but it had also demonstrated the family's ability to handle complex decisions with grace and mutual respect. The call came to Catherine on a Tuesday morning as she was reviewing her schedule for the upcoming week at Adelaide Cottage, the family's Windsor home where she and William had chosen to raise their children away from the intense scrutiny of central London. She had been sitting in her private study, a cosy room filled with family photographs and the children's artwork, when her private secretary, Hannah Cockburn-Lodi, knocked gently on the door with news that would fundamentally change Catherine's relationship with royal tradition and family history. Hannah had served Catherine for several years and had developed an intuitive understanding of how to communicate sensitive information to the Princess of Wales. Her approach was warm but professional, reflecting the more relaxed atmosphere that Catherine preferred in her private dealings while maintaining the respect and protocol required by her position. As she entered the study, Hannah carried with her not just news, but the weight of centuries of royal tradition that would soon rest on Catherine's shoulders. The information was delivered with characteristic care and attention to detail. Princess Anne had made a decision regarding a significant piece from Queen Elizabeth's personal jewelry collection, and that decision directly involved Catherine. The Jubilee Brooch, one of the late Queen's most treasured and historically significant pieces, would be transferred to Catherine as a personal gift, representing both Anne's respect for Catherine's position within the family and what Anne believed to have been Queen Elizabeth's own wishes regarding the brooch's future. Catherine's immediate reaction was one of profound surprise and deep emotion. She had indeed admired the Jubilee Brooch during her private visits with Queen Elizabeth, particularly during a memorable afternoon at Balmoral when the late Queen had shared stories about the various occasions when she had worn the piece. Those conversations had been among Catherine's most treasured memories of her relationship with her grandmother-in-law, representing moments of genuine connection and shared appreciation for the traditions that bound the royal family together. The emotional weight of the gift was immediately apparent to Catherine. This was not simply a valuable piece of jewelry being transferred from one collection to another, it was a tangible connection to Queen Elizabeth's memory, and a symbol of acceptance and trust from Princess Anne. The fact that Anne had chosen to give the brooch to her, despite other potential recipients within the family, carried deep personal and symbolic significance that Catherine fully understood and appreciated. Hannah remained present as Catherine processed the information, ready to provide additional details or answer questions as needed. The logistics of receiving such a gift were complex, involving security protocols, insurance considerations, and careful coordination between multiple palace offices. But beyond the practical matters, there were emotional and symbolic dimensions that required careful thought and consideration. Catherine's relationship with Queen Elizabeth had evolved gradually over the years, from initial nervousness and formal courtesy to genuine affection and mutual respect. The late Queen had watched Catherine's development as a royal family member with approval, noting her commitment to duty, her natural grace under pressure, and her dedication to her role as a mother and wife. More importantly, Elizabeth had recognized in Catherine someone who understood the weight of royal responsibility and the importance of preserving royal traditions while adapting them to modern circumstances. The memories of those private conversations with Queen Elizabeth came flooding back as Catherine considered the significance of the brooch. She remembered the Queen's gentle explanations of the piece's history, her descriptions of the occasions when she had worn it, and the quiet pride with which she had spoken about its creation for her silver jubilee. These conversations had given Catherine insight not just into the brooch's historical importance, but into Queen Elizabeth's personal attachment to the piece and what it had represented to her throughout her reign. The decision to accept such a gift was not one that Catherine took lightly. She understood that possessing the Jubilee brooch would bring with it certain responsibilities and expectations. The piece would need to be worn on appropriate occasions, cared for according to royal standards, and eventually passed down to future generations in accordance with royal family traditions. More immediately, its appearance in her jewelry collection would generate public interest and media attention that would require careful management. William's reaction to the news was one of support and understanding, but also recognition of the broader implications for their family and Catherine's role within the royal hierarchy. As future king, William had his own perspective on family dynamics and the symbolic importance of such gifts. His support for Catherine's acceptance of the brooch was immediate and wholehearted, but he also understood that they would need to navigate the public and family implications thoughtfully and carefully. The practical arrangements for receiving the brooch required coordination between multiple royal households and palace departments. Security protocols had to be established for the transfer, insurance documentation needed to be updated, and proper storage and care arrangements had to be made at Adelaide Cottage. These logistical considerations were handled by experienced palace staff, who understood both the value of the piece and its emotional significance to all parties involved. Catherine's first viewing of the Jubilee brooch in its new context as her personal property was an emotional experience that she would remember for years to come. The piece was brought to Adelaide Cottage by Margaret Hartwell, the chief curator who had overseen its care during Queen Elizabeth's lifetime. Margaret's presence provided continuity and historical context, as she was able to share additional stories about the brooch's creation and the various occasions when Queen Elizabeth had chosen to wear it. The beauty of the brooch was immediately striking, but it was the historical weight and personal significance that truly impressed Catherine. Holding the piece that had graced her grandmother-in-law's dress at so many important moments created a tangible connection to royal history that was both humbling and inspiring. The central cashmere sapphire seemed to capture and hold the light in a way that spoke to the craftsmanship and care that had gone into its creation decades earlier. Margaret's stories about the brooch provided Catherine with additional context about its significance within the broader royal jewelry collection. She learned about the specific occasions when Queen Elizabeth had chosen this piece over others, the personal meaning it had held for her, and the care with which it had been maintained throughout the decades. This knowledge would prove invaluable as Catherine prepared to take on the responsibility of being the brooch's new custodian. The conversation with Margaret also provided practical guidance about wearing and caring for such a significant piece. Royal jewelry required specialized knowledge about proper handling, storage and maintenance, and Margaret's expertise ensured that Catherine was fully prepared for the responsibilities that came with owning the Jubilee brooch. This included understanding the insurance requirements, security protocols, and conservation needs that would be part of her ongoing relationship with the piece. Catherine's children were naturally curious about the beautiful brooch that had arrived at their home, and their questions provided an opportunity for her to share stories about their great-grandmother and the history of the royal family. These conversations became teachable moments about tradition, responsibility, and the importance of preserving family history for future generations. The brooch became not just a piece of jewelry, but a tool for connecting the children to their royal heritage. The media attention that followed news of the brooch transfer was handled carefully by palace communications teams, who emphasized the personal and family nature of the gift, while providing appropriate historical context about the piece itself. The goal was to celebrate the continuity of royal traditions while respecting family privacy and avoiding speculation about family relationships or dynamics. Public reaction to Catherine receiving the Jubilee Brooch was overwhelmingly positive, with many viewing it as a natural and appropriate recognition of her position within the royal family and her growing relationship with Queen Elizabeth's memory. Royal watchers noted the significance of Princess Anne's choice and interpreted it as a strong endorsement of Catherine's role in the family's future. Catherine's first public wearing of the Jubilee Brooch was planned carefully to honour both Queen Elizabeth's memory and the significance of the gift from Princess Anne. The occasion chosen was a state dinner at Buckingham Palace, an event that would provide the appropriate formal setting for such a historically significant piece while allowing Catherine to pay tribute to her grandmother-in-law's legacy in a meaningful way. The preparation for wearing the brooch involved consultation with palace stylists and jewelry experts to ensure that it was presented in the most appropriate and respectful manner. The goal was to honour the piece's history while allowing Catherine's own sense of style and personality to shine through. This balance between tradition and personal expression would become a hallmark of Catherine's approach to royal jewelry throughout her future engagements. The emotional significance of wearing Queen Elizabeth's Jubilee brooch for the first time was profound for Catherine. As she prepared for the state dinner, she was acutely aware of the history and tradition that the piece represented, as well as the trust that Princess Anne had placed in her by making this gift possible. The weight of the brooch was minimal compared to the weight of responsibility and honour that it represented. The positive reception of Catherine's debut wearing of the Jubilee brooch confirmed the wisdom of Princess Anne's decision and Catherine's acceptance of the gift. Royal fashion experts noted how naturally Catherine wore the piece and how appropriately it complemented her overall style and presence. The brooch seemed to find its perfect new home, continuing its role as a symbol of royal elegance and tradition while beginning a new chapter in its distinguished history. The success of the brooch transfer and Catherine's graceful acceptance of the gift strengthened her relationships within the royal family and confirmed her position as a natural inheritor of royal traditions. Princess Anne's gesture had not only honoured Queen Elizabeth's memory but had also demonstrated confidence in Catherine's future role and her ability to carry forward the best aspects of royal tradition. As Catherine settled into her new role as custodian of the Jubilee brooch, she began to understand more fully the responsibility and privilege that came with caring for such historically significant pieces. The brooch became not just a beautiful addition to her jewelry collection, but a constant reminder of her connection to royal history and her responsibility to preserve and honour that history for future generations. The integration of the Jubilee brooch into Catherine's regular jewelry rotation was done thoughtfully and with careful attention to appropriate occasions and styling. Each time she wore the piece, she was conscious of the history it carried and the honour of being chosen as its new custodian. The brooch became a bridge between past and future, connecting Catherine to Queen Elizabeth's legacy while allowing her to create new memories and associations with this magnificent piece of royal history. Within the ancient walls of Buckingham Palace, news travelled through corridors and private offices with the speed and precision of a well-orchestrated communication network that had been refined over centuries of royal service. The transfer of the Jubilee brooch from Queen Elizabeth's collection to Catherine's personal possession became the subject of countless quiet conversations among palace staff, royal advisors, and family members, each discussion adding new layers of interpretation and meaning to Princess Anne's decisive action. The palace staff who had served Queen Elizabeth during her final years possessed intimate knowledge of her preferences, opinions, and informal expressions regarding the future of her personal belongings. Mrs. Elizabeth Harper, who had served as the Queen's personal dresser for over 20 years, found herself at the centre of several delicate conversations about the late monarch's intentions regarding her jewellery collection. Elizabeth Harper's discretion was legendary within palace circles, but her insights into the Queen's personal preferences were invaluable for understanding the context of Anne's decision. During quiet moments in the servants' quarters, away from the formal protocol that governed public palace interactions, Harper shared carefully chosen memories of the Queen's relationship with the Jubilee brooch. She recalled how Elizabeth's eyes would light up when selecting the piece for important occasions, how she had often chosen it over more traditional state jewelry when she wanted to feel personally connected to an event. Most significantly, Harper remembered specific conversations when the Queen had spoken warmly about Catherine's appreciation for the brooch and her understanding of its historical significance. These recollections provided crucial context for understanding why Princess Anne had felt confident in making her decision. The choice to give the brooch to Catherine was not an arbitrary family gesture, but rather an interpretation of signals and preferences that the Queen had expressed during her lifetime. Anne's decision reflected not only her own judgment about what would be appropriate, but also her understanding of her mother's wishes and feelings about how the brooch should continue its role in royal tradition. The reaction among senior palace courtiers was uniformly supportive of family harmony, while acknowledging the complex dynamics that such decisions inevitably created. Sir Edward Young, who had served as the Queen's private secretary during her final years, understood better than most the delicate balance required when managing royal family relationships and the distribution of personal property. His conversations with other senior staff emphasized the importance of supporting all family members while respecting the authority of those making difficult decisions. The subtle tensions that existed within the royal household became more apparent as news of the brooch transfer spread through official and unofficial channels. While no one openly criticized Princess Anne's decision or questioned her authority to make such choices, there were undercurrents of discussion about protocol, precedent, and the implications for future similar decisions. These conversations were conducted with the diplomatic skill and careful language that characterized all palace discourse, but they revealed genuine concerns about how such matters were handled and communicated. Queen Camilla's staff at Clarence House maintained absolute professionalism in their discussions of the situation, but their careful neutrality spoke volumes about the complexity of the family dynamics at play. Amanda Richardson, Camilla's private secretary, found herself managing not only the immediate implications of the brooch decision, but also the broader questions it raised about protocol and family relationships. Her conversations with other private secretaries across the royal household focused on maintaining clear communication and preventing misunderstandings that could complicate family relationships. The King's private office at Buckingham Palace became a crucial coordination point for managing the various perspectives and concerns that emerged from different royal households. Charles's position required him to balance his roles as king, brother, and husband, while ensuring that all family members felt supported and respected. His staff worked carefully to facilitate communication between different royal offices and to ensure that all practical matters were handled smoothly without creating additional tensions. William's office at Kensington Palace found itself in the unique position of representing the recipient of the controversial gift, while maintaining appropriate relationships with all family members. The Prince of Wales's staff understood that Catherine's acceptance of the brooch was both an honour and a potential source of family complexity, requiring careful management of public communications and family relationships. Their approach emphasized gratitude and respect, while avoiding any appearance of triumphalism or insensitivity to other family members' feelings. The historical precedents for such jewelry transfers became the subject of extensive research and discussion among palace archivists and protocol experts. Previous examples of royal jewelry distribution provided some guidance, but each situation had its unique characteristics that made direct comparisons difficult. The complexity of modern royal family relationships, combined with increased public scrutiny and media attention, created new challenges that had not existed during earlier generations of royal jewelry inheritance. Legal advisors across the various royal households worked quietly to ensure that all aspects of the brooch transfer were properly documented and that any potential complications were anticipated and addressed. While royal family jewelry transfers were generally straightforward from a legal perspective, the high-profile nature of this particular decision required extra attention to detail and proper documentation. The goal was to ensure that the transfer was unassailable from both legal and protocol perspectives. The insurance and security implications of the brooch transfer required coordination among multiple specialists and departments. Moving such a valuable and historically significant piece from one location and collection to another involved complex calculations about risk, coverage, and protection. Security protocols had to be updated to reflect the brooch's new location and ownership, while insurance documentation needed to be revised to ensure proper coverage under Catherine's personal collection rather than the general royal collection. Media relations teams across all royal households prepared for the inevitable public interest that would follow news of the brooch transfer. Their challenge was to provide appropriate information about the historical significance of the piece and the family context of the transfer, while maintaining respect for family privacy and avoiding speculation about internal royal relationships. The goal was to present the transfer as a positive family gesture that honoured Queen Elizabeth's memory while celebrating Catherine's role in the royal family's future. The international implications of the brooch decision were subtle but significant, particularly in Commonwealth countries, where royal jewellery choices were closely watched as symbols of continuity and tradition. Diplomatic representatives from various Commonwealth nations expressed interest in understanding the significance of the transfer and its implications for future royal engagements and state visits. The choice of jewelry for international occasions carried symbolic weight that extended far beyond personal family relationships. Royal biography writers and historians began placing the brooch transfer within the broader context of royal family evolution and the changing dynamics of modern monarchy. Their analyses focused on what the decision revealed about family relationships, the role of different royal family members, and the ongoing process of adapting royal traditions to contemporary circumstances. These scholarly perspectives provided additional context for understanding the significance of Princess Anne's choice. The charitable organizations and patronages associated with various royal family members watched the jewelry situation with interest, understanding that royal fashion choices often influenced public attention and support for their causes. The debut wearing of the Jubilee brooch at future royal engagements would inevitably generate media coverage that could benefit the charitable organizations involved, creating additional considerations for how and when the piece would be worn publicly. Fashion experts and royal-style commentators began analyzing the aesthetic and symbolic implications of Catherine acquiring such a significant piece. Their discussions focused on how the brooch would complement Catherine's existing style, the occasions when it might be worn, and the message that such choices would send about her evolving role within the royal family. These analyses contributed to the growing public interest in the story and its implications. The younger generation of royal family members, including Catherine and William's children, became indirect beneficiaries of the brooch transfer, as it added to the collection of historically significant pieces that would eventually be part of their royal inheritance. The decision to give the brooch to Catherine established a precedent for how such transfers might be handled in the future, and demonstrated the importance of preserving significant pieces within the direct line of succession. Palace staff who specialized in royal wardrobe management began preparing for the practical implications of Catherine's new ownership of the Jubilee brooch. This included understanding its care requirements, determining appropriate storage solutions, and planning for its integration into Catherine's jewelry rotation for various official and state occasions. The expertise required to properly maintain and present such a significant piece was considerable, and required coordination among multiple specialists. The symbolic weight of the brooch transfer extended beyond the immediate family to represent broader questions about tradition, change, and continuity within the monarchy. Royal watchers interpreted the decision as evidence of Princess Anne's confidence in Catherine's understanding of royal duty and her commitment to preserving important traditions while adapting them to modern circumstances. As the initial shock and discussion of the brooch transfer began to settle into accepted palace routine, the focus shifted to its longer-term implications for family relationships and royal protocol. The successful management of this complex situation demonstrated the royal family's ability to handle sensitive internal matters with discretion and diplomacy while maintaining public respect and support. The precedent established by Princess Anne's decision would likely influence how similar situations were handled in the future, creating informal guidelines for jewelry transfers and family gift-giving that balanced personal preferences with protocol requirements. The careful attention to all parties' feelings and the emphasis on family harmony provided a model for managing complex royal family decisions. The conclusion of the immediate discussions surrounding the brooch transfer marked the beginning of a new chapter in its history, as Catherine prepared to take on the full responsibility of being its custodian, while honoring both Queen Elizabeth's memory and Princess Anne's generous gesture. The palace whispers that initially focused on surprise and speculation gradually evolved into acceptance and anticipation of how this beautiful piece would continue its role in royal tradition under Catherine's care. 6 months after Princess Anne's momentous decision in the Windsor Castle vault, the Jubilee brooch had found its perfect new home and purpose within Catherine's royal wardrobe, becoming not just a treasured piece of jewelry, but a powerful symbol of continuity, family bonds, and the evolving nature of modern monarchy. The initial uncertainty and complex family dynamics that had surrounded the transfer had given way to a new understanding of how royal traditions could be preserved while adapting to contemporary circumstances and relationships. Catherine's first major public appearance wearing the Jubilee brooch had exceeded all expectations, both in terms of its visual impact and its symbolic resonance with the British public and international observers. The occasion chosen for its debut was a state dinner honoring the President of France, an event that provided the perfect formal setting for such a historically significant piece, while allowing Catherine to pay tribute to Queen Elizabeth's memory in the most appropriate possible context. The careful preparation that had gone into that first wearing reflected the deep respect Catherine felt for the brooch's history and the responsibility she had accepted in becoming its new custodian. Working closely with palace stylists and jewelry experts, she had chosen a midnight blue gown that perfectly complemented the sapphire's deep color, while allowing the brooch to be the focal point of her ensemble. The choice demonstrated both her natural sense of style and her understanding of the symbolic weight that royal fashion choices carried. The public and media response to Catherine's debut wearing of the Jubilee brooch had been overwhelmingly positive, with fashion experts praising her elegant presentation of the piece, and royal commentators noting the appropriateness of the choice for such a significant diplomatic occasion. The brooch had performed its traditional role of representing British royal elegance while beginning to create new associations and memories in Catherine's care. More importantly, the successful debut had validated Princess Anne's decision and demonstrated that the brooch had found a worthy new custodian who understood both its historical significance and its ongoing role in royal tradition. The natural grace with which Catherine wore the piece and the confidence she displayed in presenting it publicly confirmed that Anne's judgment had been sound and that the transfer had been beneficial for both the brooch and the royal family. The relationship between Catherine and Princess Anne had been strengthened by the entire experience, with both women gaining a deeper appreciation for each other's understanding of royal duty and family responsibility. Their conversations about the brooch and its history had provided opportunities for sharing insights about Queen Elizabeth's preferences and memories, creating new bonds between them while honoring the memory of the woman they had both loved and respected. Anne's satisfaction with the outcome of her decision was evident in her continued support for Catherine's choices regarding when and how to wear the brooch. Her occasional comments to close friends and family members revealed her pleasure in seeing the piece being worn with such appropriate dignity, and her confidence that Catherine would continue to honor its history while creating new chapters in its story. The impact on Queen Camilla had been managed with characteristic grace and diplomacy, with all parties working to ensure that family relationships remained strong and supportive throughout the process. Camilla's dignified acceptance of the situation and her continued warm relationship with Catherine demonstrated the maturity and wisdom that had come to characterize her approach to royal family dynamics. The king's role in supporting all family members while respecting his sister's decision had been crucial in maintaining family harmony and ensuring that the brooch transfer did not create lasting tensions or divisions. His careful balance between his various roles and relationships had provided a model for how complex family situations could be managed within the unique context of royal life. The broader palace staff had also adapted successfully to the new arrangement, with security protocols updated to reflect the brooch's location at Adelaide Cottage and care procedures established to ensure its proper maintenance under Catherine's ownership. The seamless integration of these practical arrangements demonstrated the professionalism and adaptability that characterized royal household management. Public interest in the Jubilee brooch had led to increased attention to royal jewelry choices more generally, with fashion watchers and royal commentators paying closer attention to Catherine's selections for various occasions. This heightened scrutiny had been managed carefully through strategic choices about when and where to wear particularly significant pieces, ensuring that each appearance created positive associations while respecting the historical weight of the jewelry involved. The educational opportunities created by public interest in the brooch had been embraced by palace communications teams, who had developed materials explaining the piece's history and significance while highlighting its role in connecting past and future generations of royal family members. These educational efforts had helped the public understand the deeper meaning behind royal jewelry choices and their role in preserving British cultural heritage. Catherine's children had become increasingly interested in the stories associated with the Jubilee brooch and other significant pieces in their mother's collection, leading to valuable conversations about their royal heritage and the responsibilities that would eventually be theirs. These family discussions had helped connect the younger generation to their great-grandmother's memory, while teaching them about the importance of preserving traditions for future generations. The success of the brooch transfer had established new precedents for how similar decisions might be handled in the future, creating informal guidelines that balanced family preferences with protocol requirements while ensuring that all parties felt respected and supported. These precedents would prove valuable as other significant pieces from Queen Elizabeth's collection were eventually distributed among family members. International reactions to Catherine's acquisition and wearing of the Jubilee brooch had been universally positive, with diplomatic representatives and Commonwealth observers noting the appropriateness of the choice and the dignity with which the transition had been managed. The brooch's appearances at international occasions had continued its role as a symbol of British royal tradition, while beginning to create new associations with Catherine's growing international profile. The charitable organisations and causes supported by Catherine had benefited from the increased media attention that accompanied her wearing of such significant jewellery, with reporters and photographers showing particular interest in events where the Jubilee brooch made appearances. This additional attention had helped raise awareness and support for various charitable initiatives, demonstrating how royal fashion choices could serve broader social purposes. Academic historians and royal biographers had begun incorporating the brooch transfer into their analyses of modern royal family evolution, viewing it as evidence of the monarchy's ability to adapt traditional practices to contemporary circumstances while preserving essential elements of continuity and tradition. These scholarly perspectives had contributed to a broader understanding of how royal families managed change while maintaining stability. The conservation and care of the Jubilee brooch under Catherine's ownership had been handled with meticulous attention to preserving its condition for future generations, with regular professional cleaning and maintenance ensuring that the piece remained in pristine condition. This careful stewardship reflected Catherine's understanding of her role as a temporary custodian of this important piece of royal history. Regional and local communities had shown particular interest in the brooch's history and significance during Catherine's official visits, with many people expressing appreciation for her role in preserving and presenting such important cultural artifacts. These positive public interactions had reinforced the value of maintaining visible connections to royal history while adapting traditions to contemporary contexts. The integration of the Jubilee brooch into Catherine's regular jewellery rotation had been accomplished thoughtfully and strategically, with each wearing carefully considered for its appropriateness to the occasion and its potential symbolic impact. This careful curation had ensured that the piece continued to serve its traditional role, while creating new memories and associations for future generations. As the first year of Catherine's custodianship of the Jubilee brooch drew to a close, the success of Princess Anne's decision had become clear to all involved parties and observers. The brooch had found a worthy new home where it was appreciated, properly cared for, and presented with appropriate dignity and respect. More importantly, the entire experience had demonstrated the royal family's ability to handle complex internal decisions with wisdom, grace, and mutual respect. The lasting legacy of the brooch transfer would extend far beyond the immediate family dynamics it had revealed and influenced. It had established new models for preserving royal traditions while adapting them to contemporary circumstances, demonstrated the importance of understanding and honoring family members' wishes and preferences, and shown how thoughtful decision-making could strengthen rather than strain family relationships. Looking toward the future, the Jubilee brooch would continue its role as a symbol of royal tradition and British cultural heritage, but now with new associations and memories that connected it to Catherine's growing legacy as a member of the royal family. The piece would eventually be passed down to future generations, carrying with it the stories of both Queen Elizabeth's reign and Catherine's contribution to royal tradition. The transformation of what could have been a divisive family dispute into a celebration of tradition, respect, and family bonds had provided a powerful example of how complex situations could be managed with wisdom and grace. Princess Anne's decisive action, Catherine's gracious acceptance, and Camilla's dignified response had all contributed to an outcome that strengthened rather than weakened family relationships, while ensuring that an important piece of royal history found its perfect new home. The Jubilee brooch itself seemed to sparkle with renewed purpose as it began this new chapter of its remarkable history. Having successfully transitioned from one generation of royal women to the next, while maintaining its role as a symbol of the continuity, tradition, and enduring appeal of the British monarchy. In Catherine's hands, it would continue to represent the best aspects of royal heritage, while adapting to serve the needs and circumstances of a new generation committed to preserving the past while embracing the future.